Welcome, everyone, to DEI After 5, the show that focuses on topics across diversity, equity, and inclusion with some of the brightest minds in the industry. Here's your hostess, inclusive culture curator and coach, Sacha Thompson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of DEI After 5. So, this past year or two has been quite interesting. And, in the work that I do with leaders, I'm often asking them to pause and just really think about how they're showing up as leaders. And one of the pieces of advice that I give them really is, how do you get out of your head and really connect with your heart? How do you see the humanity in the folks that are a part of your team? And not just seeing them as individuals, right? Like truly connecting to who they are and what's important to them, and really leaning into the humanistic side of this work. And what's so interesting for so many people, that is the total opposite of how they were raised to be leaders. But this is what is being asked of this post-pandemic workforce and what's the expectation of the post-pandemic workforce. And so today I am talking to Erin Thorpe, who is a consultant in this space. And we're really going to lean into what does it mean to bring empathy into leadership. So Erin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sacha. It's great to be here.
So Erin, for anyone that may not know who you are, can you just give us a little bit of your background and how you got into this work?
Yeah, the short version is I'm an engineer that talks about empathy and feelings. So that usually sparks a little bit of interest right off the bat. But I have an engineering background. I've spent almost 22 years in the commercial construction and industrial construction space. And a few years ago, really got curious about my own leadership journey, about others, and started to dig into this topic of what does it mean to lead with empathy. And that's brought me to where I am today. So I write and speak and teach and consult and coach all around how to add empathy to our leadership toolbox, really.
I love it. Mm-hmm. So just for folks that, because I know people, right? They're gonna be like, oh, that's the touchy-feely stuff. Right. So can you just give us kind of a baseline definition of empathy so we kind of are all on the same page?
Yeah, for sure. For me, empathy is about feeling with people, not for people. And it's a nuanced, right, with and for. And the difference really is, when I feel for somebody, I want to dive into things like fixing and taking it away and making it better, or ignoring it all at once. Mm-hmm. When I feel with somebody, it's nuanced, but the difference in what we are activated to do is very different. When I feel with people, I'm curious, right? I want to dig in. I want to know more. I want to see how I can maybe support them.
I love that.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes, again, and it's part of how we are raised to some degree, it's like, let me fix it, right? Yeah. Like that's also a part of, this dominant culture in the corporate space. There's a problem, let's fix it. The problem, let's solve it. But we're human. And so oftentimes I don't want you to fix it per se, but just like hear me or listen to me. And sometimes that need is very different depending on, who it is or what the situation is. Yeah. No, go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting because, especially with my background of very technical spaces, we are highly paid problem solvers, right? We go to school for 4 or 5 or 6 years to learn how to solve complex technical problems. The better we can solve them, the faster we can solve them, the more likely we are to be recognized in our careers. So this is a muscle that we build every day, all day long. And when we're talking about situations and widgets and, numbers on a screen, it's a great skill to have. And we
Yeah.
need that skill. When we're talking about people, we need something different. And I always equate this, that problem solving tool is one tool in our leadership toolbox, but it's not the only tool. And so if you have to hang a picture, you're going to use a hammer if you have a nail. But if you have a screw to hang that picture, a hammer's not going to get you very far.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we need to add a different tool to our leadership toolbox. And that tool that I'm suggesting we add is this, this ability to lead with empathy, because as you said, people don't want to be fixed. People are not, they're not broken. There's really nothing wrong with them. We just all have we're humans having a human experience, and we all have different lenses through which we see the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so the empathy tool allows us to be curious, allows us to dig in. And when we act with curiosity and we lead with that, we actually find out more information, and then we can take better action. Because sometimes we do need to fix a problem, not the human being, but a problem, right? Or a challenge or a circumstance. But often we miss that information because we're trying to solve the problem of the person.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting because, as you're talking, one of the things that I'm thinking about is, just as you were saying, right, you're taught how to solve problems, right, how to fix widgets, this very emotions at the door, like emotionless, let's take them out of the equation. But what is being asked now in this post-pandemic workplace is people are wanting their leaders to be coaches and mentors and to be able to connect with them as humans. And so there's this disconnect that is taking place where folks that have been taught, well, you leave your emotions at the door, and now this is being asked of them, they don't know how to function. It's almost like that robot that's overpowered, you see the smoke starting to come out.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. And so I'm seeing so much of that in the workplace of, I don't know what to say or do because I just want to solve problems. Like I'm here just to get to the bottom line of, what we were hired to do.
Yeah.
But now there's this added layer of, no, you have to actually show up and be a coach and mentor and supporter of the people on your team.
Yeah.
And so as you're doing this work, what are some of the ways that people can at least get to that first level of empathy, right? Like they're trying to at least make that first connection.
Yeah. Great question. And I would say, I saw this in my work before the pandemic. And really for me, the catalyst was around as our workforces and our workplaces became more global, right?
Yeah.
So as we started to have the ability to connect through technology and bring people into our businesses that maybe weren't there before, this was a budding, sprouting problem, or challenge, if you will, for leaders. And so the place that I usually start with leaders in my work, so in order to practice empathy with others, we have to first start practicing it with ourselves. And because, because this is an emotional skill, right? There are going to be, there's going to be discomfort with it because emotions, if we feel the full range, and I would very much go on the record stating that we don't even like to feel the full extent of positive emotions, right?
No, not at all.
We don't let ourselves feel high levels of joy and euphoria and all of these things because we're always looking for that, like, when's the next shoe going to drop, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
So as leaders in this corporate world, we've really been socialized to ride this line of like, don't feel anything, just be neutral. And empathy is going to cause you to oscillate between, right, the highs and the lows of your emotion. So the more capacity you have to feel your own emotions, right? If you can ride that wave with yourself, you're going to be more likely to be able to ride that wave with your team. It's not team first and then self. It's the other way around.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where I ask leaders to start is in feeling their own emotions. And usually it's rather strange, but the safest place for people to start to feel their own emotions is usually in the shower, Sacha. It's a weird place.
Okay.
But if you're going to feel anything, a lot of our leaders have this aversion to tears and crying and expressing emotion. So the shower is a great place. The tears wash away, they're
Mhm.
hidden. It's like a contained space of time. You're not in the shower for hours on end every day. You got 5 minutes or 10 minutes to get in and out. This is where you can do that check-in with self.
Yeah.
What am I feeling today? And just feel it in the shower. You can convince your mind, you can tell your mind, like, as soon as I open that door or move that curtain back, like, I'm done feeling that thing,
Yeah.
right?
Acknowledge it. You have to
I can
acknowledge.
acknowledge it. I can
Yeah.
give it some space, but it doesn't have to take over my day. It doesn't have to, derail everything. It's just that's my safe private place to do some feeling.
Yeah. I love that.
And so that's like exercise number one, really. This is like super foundational. Think about it like your squats, your lunges, your push-ups, your sit-ups, for the physical body, it's just the
Yeah.
super foundational skill. Because the more space you can allow yourself to feel,
Yeah.
the less scary it is when you're sitting with someone and they're having a big emotion and it causes you to feel something. Because that's what happens
Yeah.
when we're with our team and their emotions are coming up. It causes us to start to feel something,
Discomfort, anxiety,
whatever it is.
or
It
whatever.
brings,
Right.
yeah, it brings up emotion in you. And
Yeah.
that's what the leader is scared of. We're scared of that. And we're like, I got to shut this down because I got to keep this business focused. Well, I hate to burst the bubble, but if you require people to deliver whatever it is your business delivers, then you've got to develop the skill of emotional capacity because
Yeah.
we're human beings. We have emotions.
Okay. So, I often share with my clients the wheel of emotions.
Yes.
And what is very fascinating to me is so many people only know, 4 or 5
Yeah.
emotions: happy, sad, angry, frustrated, like they know the basics. And then when they see this wheel, like you could see their eyes get big, like, oh, wait a minute, there's levels to this, there's
Yeah.
layers to this. And the exercise is when you wake up in the morning, where are you on the wheel?
Mhm.
And just make note of that throughout your day, 2 or 3 times throughout the day. And what I've seen happen with that is exactly what you're saying, right? People, they tune into that one thing and they're like, okay, I can name it
Mhm.
and I can move on,
Yeah.
right? The next piece of that is I have the emotion, but then how do I respond to it?
Yeah.
Because if you can't figure out how to respond to it within yourself, then exactly what you're saying, when they get it from someone else and they immediately shut down because they don't even know how to respond to their own emotions. So
Yeah.
how do you start to exercise that muscle? And that's why I love, the analogies that you're using, because it is a muscle that you have to
Totally.
practice, you have to
Yeah.
exercise
Yeah.
on a regular basis. And so since I've been doing this work and being much more attuned even to my own emotions,
Mhm.
I know how to show up and I know exactly what I need to do to regulate them as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Right? And so now what you're starting to see, or at least what I'm starting to see, is people showing up in a much more authentic way.
Totally. Totally. I often in workshops will refer to the emotional wheel as well. And we have one on our fridge, right? So the kids, like with the children, like we're just trying to teach them a little bit more language around
Mhm.
emotions, right? Because you're right. People will often, like, the go-to is anger, but
Yeah.
anger is a secondary emotion that's masking something else. And
Yeah.
how to respond to hurt is very different than how to respond to frustration or
Mhm.
disappointment, right? And when you start to pull the anger apart and get into what's really going on, the answer becomes a bit more obvious as to what we need to do. And so again, if we go back to where we started around like, well, I want to fix it. I want to make this person feel better, or I want to get rid of this emotion. You got to name it first, right?
Absolutely.
We name our physical symptoms. Like, I'm not going to give you cold medicine if you've got a bruised toe, right? Like, it's not going to fix the problem.
Right.
So it's like, what are the symptoms? How do we pull this apart? And then, like, again, this empathy muscle just allows us to be curious to gather this information.
Yeah.
And
then, the other piece of that is that inner battle of, okay, so now I'm dealing with my own emotions. Now you're asking me to deal with other people's emotions, but this is not what I've been taught to do. So there's like this cognitive dissonance that starts to occur, and it's difficult. It really is. And you often see leaders go back to what they know
all the time
versus pushing through the discomfort of this new space. And it's funny because I was talking to 2 leaders this morning, going over a review of like their psychological safety assessments. And I told them, both of them, I was like, I had to look at your results a couple of times because I've never had results this high for any team that I've ever done this for. And I asked them, like, what is it that you do? And it truly was about being empathetic, understanding the needs of the folks on their teams, like really being intentional in understanding, okay, like, where do you want to go with your career? Like, what experiences do you want to have? You're frustrated. Okay, so let's talk about that. Right. And so they were able to clearly articulate what it was that each of the people on their team wanted and needed and what frustrated them. But then also very realistic about, okay, this is what I can do to help versus this is something that's going to take a little bit more time. And it was very refreshing to actually have this conversation with them because you could see, and one of them even said, she was like, I truly adore my team on a human level.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's like an aspirational goal right there, to have leaders that adore their teams on a human level. Like,
on
that
a
is
human
it.
level. And
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I was like, can I just box you up and just put you as like,
yes,
the epitome of inclusive leadership.
It is.
And it's not that they're the perfect team.
No.
It's these leaders are giving their team exactly what they need, and they feel and they understand, and they're connecting with them on this human level. What is something else that leaders can do? Because we have folks that are listening right now that I am sure are like, okay, this is so just very touchy-feely. This is just not me, not who I am. What is something else that they could probably do to kind of at least put their toe in the water?
Yeah, I think, one of the other kind of intro exercises that I'll often use is around body language, because that's something that we are, as human beings, a little bit more in tune with too. And it's often something that we will ignore. We'll have a sense that something's off just by the way somebody's like holding their arms or their face or, the way they're standing or sitting in a room. There's information there. And so it's like paying attention to that. Where are people looking when you're talking to them? Are they able to make eye contact? If not, maybe we get curious and ask why. If somebody, I use this example, if I'm like in front of a live audience, you'll always have some people sitting there with like their arms crossed, right? And they're like leaning way back. And I'm like, are you disinterested or are you cold? Because they're two different things, right? But it's that curiosity muscle. It's just like, let's ask some questions.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big key is we think that exploring emotion, or even just, maybe it's not even emotion. It's just like, hey, what's going on with you? Right? Like, where are you at today? Kind of doing a human check-in is going to slow us down.
Absolutely not.
That's the belief, right? The belief is if I take time to even ask how their morning's going or how their weekend was, it's going to slow us down. And yet we know from experience, we know from the research, we know from just like doing it ourselves, that if people take time to connect with us, it speeds us up. We're more invested. We care. We want to do a little bit more because we have made this determination that this leader cares about us.
Yeah.
And it's the caring that affects our intentions, our behaviors, and our results.
And I love that example that you gave, because, it also ties back to, what I was saying earlier about just knowing people, right? Because if you know people, then you can interpret that body language a little bit better.
Exactly.
Right? So for someone that's leaning back in their chair, depending on how well you know them, you can easily say, okay, I lost you. Where did I lose you? Right? Versus, oh, you know what? You seem a little chilly.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can kind of determine that based on what you know about the person. But you have to know them. Right?
But
and
you
it's
gotta
so
know
funny.
them.
Yeah. And so it's so funny because I'm I call myself like pretty keen on body language and picking up, especially like in this virtual space where a lot of people were struggling. And we had like 20 boxes, like the Brady Bunch screen. One of my, I guess, skills was to be able to hone in on that one box and say, okay, so I noticed that you did, you kind of tilted your head a certain way. What does that mean? Like what's going on there? And it's those little nuances, right? The tilting of the head, the leaning back, like the smirk that might come on someone's face, right? Being able to hone in and not ignore, right? Just as you said, not ignore it, right? Or you might not say anything in that moment, but make a note of it. Like, okay, I noticed that when we were in the meeting a few hours ago, that you had the smirk on your face. Like, tell me a little bit more about that. Like, what was going on? What was going through your head?
Yeah.
Right. Again, you're building that connection, and what that made me think of around psychological safety is that's inclusion.
It is. It is. And, I experienced in my career a lot of effort around diversity, right? Like I'm a woman, I'm in engineering. We've been fighting for years to up the numbers nationally and internationally, attract more women, keep more women, do all this work in the profession. That effort is all great, but it's never going to move the needle if we don't feel welcome.
Right.
If we don't feel like we can show up as ourselves. And let's be honest, a lot of men and a lot of women express emotion very differently.
Yes.
Like I grew up on a construction site in my career, throwing a hammer, slamming a door, tossing a chair across the room, all very acceptable ways to express emotion. Now, if you were to ask somebody in construction if that was an emotional expression, they would probably say no, because they don't identify it as an emotional expression. But that's exactly what it is. You're feeling something big and you acted, right? For me, it was tears. When I got overwhelmed, frustrated, disappointed, let down, whatever it was, if enough of that built up, and if I didn't do my own work to just feel it every day and the little bits that it came, it's like tucking it all into a pressure cooker or an Instapot, and then it blows up at the worst possible time. Somebody just walks into your office and says, hey, Erin, we've got a problem out here on site, and you lose it, and there I am crying on the construction site. And everybody on the construction site, again, knew how to handle somebody who had just thrown a hammer and buried it in the wall, but nobody knew how to deal with me and a few tears.
Yeah.
And what I would love to just help people see is that these are exactly the same symptoms of the same problem, like two different symptoms of the same problem, right? Yeah. And you're going to sit with that guy. You're going to give that guy or that person that threw a hammer across the wall, some time and space to cool off. You're going to go back. You're going to have a conversation. What's going on? That's all I need too. You don't have to be scared of the tears.
Right.
Right. Just let them flow and let them pass, and then go, hey, what's going on there? What are you feeling?
And it's interesting because in those situations, often what's said is, oh, Erin's so emotional.
Totally. Like 10
Whereas,
years, I
but
was told
there's a hammer, like there's a hammer in the wall.
it's embedded in the wall, people. Like, exactly. For 10 years, I was told you're way too emotional to lead. You got to
Mhm.
get a game face. You got to toughen up. You got to, and I tried, Sasha, I tried for 10 years and I was going to leave my profession because they didn't think I was cut out to lead. And it
Yeah.
was a leader who saw this ability in me to see in others what was going on, who said, I need your help because you have a skill that I don't have, that completely changed how I saw this aspect of myself.
Mm. Yeah.
And I'm
And
so
that's
thankful they did
right.
because, I mean, it has opened up, I mean, it's where I'm at today.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to be scared of the emotion anymore. And I'll tell you, I I mean, I still cry because that's part of my emotional expression, but it doesn't take me by surprise anymore and I don't get uncomfortable about it.
Yeah. But I think the key of what you just said was you had someone that saw
Yep.
beyond the emotion to the skills that you
Totally.
had, and like, let's tap into that.
Yeah.
Right. And because they invested in you as a leader, it gave you the grace and space that you needed to be able to
Totally.
understand the emotions, right? And then,
Totally.
okay, now I can deal with and understand
Yeah.
that. And that is so important in this process because, and again, women, particularly women of color, are often told, oh, you're aggressive and you're angry,
Yeah.
all of these negative emotions. And that's used as a way to dismiss the leadership skills that someone may bring to the table or other skills that they can bring to the organization. And it's all because it goes back to what you said, because the organization or someone in the organization doesn't know how to deal with those emotions.
Totally. So, we can do all the work we want around diversity and getting different people with perspectives and, you know, cultural background and colors of skin at the table. But if we're not willing to actually sit in their lived experience and explore that, we're
Mhm.
never going to get to inclusion, which is never going to get to equity, which is never going to get to actually harvesting the benefit of the diversity, right? We're just going to keep building teams that think and act like us.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and that doesn't get us the best results.
Absolutely. I often will say, do the people on your team, do they feel valued? Do they feel seen? Do they feel heard?
Yeah.
And do they feel connected to the organization? And if you don't say yes to all four of those things, like with your soul, say yes
Yeah.
to all four of those things about each individual person on your team, then there's some work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the part
Totally.
that, you're talking about. It's not just the diversity, it's the inclusion, it's the equity, it's all of that other work that is so hard to do in this space where everyone feels like I am valued here, I belong here, or I feel like I belong. I'm The work that I do is seen as something that is beneficial to the organization, all of those things. If those things don't happen, people are going to be out the back door just as fast as they were in the front door.
Totally. And, we hit on it earlier with my example of somebody recognizing the skill in me. But if you could be losing some very skilled top talent simply because you are not taking the time to understand who they are as a human being, what they're dealing with outside the four walls of the workplace,
Yeah.
and allowing them to just show up as their human person,
Yeah.
and really just connecting with them. And what I have found, I have very few examples, where somebody has dug into this emotional work, let's call it, and discovered, that they needed to drastically change the rules or the goals or
Mhm.
the, output for a person. In fact, 9.5 times out of 10, what happens is they dig into this emotional work and everything stays the same. The person starts to recommit, they start to meet the goals, they get excited about the work again, simply because somebody took the time to understand them,
Yeah.
right?
That's all this is, right? It's
All it
just
is.
getting to the core of
Yeah.
humanity.
Yeah.
Right? Just tapping into the humanness of people and the people on your teams and making them feel not that like they're a widget, right?
Yeah.
They are people with lives and ups and downs and so all of those things. So
Exactly.
Erin, I'm gonna do a little bit of a pivot because we were just, talking about these
Let's
ups
do
and
it.
downs. Like, what are the things that you do to take care of you? Like, how do you fill
Mm.
your cup? What are the things that you do?
Yeah. Lately, uh, so I'm raising teenagers right now, so the house is usually very noisy, very chaotic. Life is busy and full. There's lots of running around and events. So for me right now, a lot of what fills my cup is alone time, right? Whether that's maybe in a yoga class or going to a coffee shop and reading, or taking a walk. I've really started to just like simplify the things that fill my cup, you
Mm,
know, because life is very full. And it's interesting because I remember it would have been 2015 when I kind of was just starting to figure out like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? And doing my own personal work, that one of the practitioners that I was seeing had given me this practice of spending 2 hours alone by myself once a week.
mm.
It was impossible, Sasha. Like,
I
to the point where
would
I
love
was
to.
like, I was so uncomfortable. Like, I would run around
Mhm.
and do errands and grocery shop and pick up stuff for the kids and, you know, meet up with people, and I would just fill the time. And I'm like, I can't be alone. And what I realize now looking back, it was because there was so much feeling work that I had to do. And so much I wasn't allowing myself to feel, that I couldn't be alone with myself. And so what's really
Mhm.
neat is, almost 10 years later, I can be alone with myself. I can be alone. I'm not scared of what might come up. And in fact, I'm kind of curious about what might come up because I know it's good information. It's either going to confirm that I'm on the right path and doing the right things, or it's going to alert me
Yeah, steer you in a
that,
different direction.
right? Like, it's going to alert me. I might have to feel the fullness of my tired or my overwhelm or my frustration. And then I can go, okay, so what's causing that? And what shifts can I make? Because you know, when we want to kind of grip and control the outer world, that's when we really need to go in and go like, what is it within my inner world that
Mhm.
I can control?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta get to the root
Yeah.
of the challenge.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, just as you were saying, this is a journey, right? And
Mm,
no one just shows up kind
mm-mm.
of knowing how to deal with their emotion or feelings
No.
or what have you. Like, it truly is a journey and a process. And first of all, if I was told to spend 2 hours by myself, I'd be like, "Ooh, yes, okay." Just
Yeah. Yeah.
because I'm an introvert, and that's where I fill my cup. Like, that's where I find calm. That's where I can kind
Yes.
of like get things out of my head. That's where I just don't think sometimes, like just do
Yeah.
nothing. And you don't often have the time to do that. And so I was just like, ooh, 2 hours.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I'm also an introvert, but what I realized is I wasn't allowing myself to do it because I was so afraid of what I would feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so then you start to fill the time and you start to numb out and you start to be busy so that you don't have to feel. And
It's
I
an
and I would
escape.
say that's, again, that's why I often start with the shower exercises, because you're kind of doing something, but there's a window there into like
Yeah.
what's going on inside of me, and it's that bit of that safe space. Because if you're not used to feeling whatever you're feeling and you try to do it for 2 hours, it's going to feel like going into the gym and bench pressing 500 pounds. Like, we don't start with the heaviest weights
Right.
when we go in to start our fitness journey.
Yeah.
We got to start small. We got to scale it. And it is a journey. It's no different than being, living a healthy lifestyle, or, committing to just working out for no other reason than having healthy muscles, or
Hmm.
eating green plants because we want to have, good digestion. It's like, if you want this,
That.
if you want this empathy tool in your leadership toolbox, you got to practice almost daily,
Yeah.
with yourself and with others in small ways, in really small ways, one question at a time. Start
Yes.
with the kids after school, start with the spouse over coffee in the morning, do the shower check-in. Hey, what's really going on for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm going to share before we kind of pivot again. I was in a situation where I got very agitated with someone recently, and I had to sit there and figure out, okay, what is it that I'm feeling? Because at first I was saying, oh, I'm just frustrated. I'm just angry. And I was like, no, I'm agitated. And
Yeah.
so when I was agitated, what I ended up doing was sitting here in my office, turning the lights out, closing my eyes, and turning on a meditation on my phone. Right. It was just a breathing exercise.
Mhm.
And just doing that for about 3 to 5 minutes, I was able to just like, okay, let me calm down. Let me now figure out like a solution to this situation. And I was able to approach it in a much healthier way.
Yes.
Old Sasha would have been already set in like 0 to 60.
Yeah.
And, you know, the
Yep.
angry Kermit
Yep.
typing away. And, you know, so there was growth. That was actually like, wow, okay,
Yep.
this is a much healthier way for me to manage and deal with these things. And it's not often that I get agitated or frustrated, you
Yeah.
know, because I'm so aligned and attuned with my emotions. But when it happens, okay, what do I need to do to bring this down? How do I then deal with it and then
Yeah.
move forward? So I just
Yeah.
wanted to share. It's a process. It is absolutely a process.
It
So
is a
Erin,
process. And I think, you've touched on something really good. Is like, okay, so when I notice that I get activated, like what are those simple tools? Because they're fairly
yeah,
simple tools. So a couple of the go-tos, if you not everyone can access breathing and meditation work because it just feels again too far out. It feels like too heavy of a lift.
yeah,
If you can, I think that's a great re-regulating tool. Some other tips and tricks is to take a sip of water, right? As we consume, this is why, we can end up with emotional eating or, overindulging in maybe having a drink or two is because it calms the nervous system, right? That's why we do it. So again, if you can start to recognize, oh, I'm just in a state of dysregulation here because I'm feeling something big, I can take a few sips of my water and, you know, let it sit and I will start to re-regulate. Getting outside and going for a walk. I have a little like 1 kilometer loop here that it's like, if I'm really fired up, I'm like 10 minutes, go for the walk, just do the
yeah,
loop. It gets you out in nature, it gets you breathing, you're moving your body, you're moving that energy. Yeah. And no longer am I like pounding out the email or the nasty words I want to say. And I can come in and you're absolutely right. You can just approach it from a much healthier way. But what I mean by healthy is you get the result you want, right? You're responding instead of reacting.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So Erin, how can folks get in contact with you if they wanted to learn more about the work that you do or, just connect with you?
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Sasha. The best place is to head on over to the website, which is www.erinthorpe.ca. From there, you can find more information about my book, connect with me on social media, and also take a listen to my new podcast, which is coming out in 2024. So,
Yay.
yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Erin, thank you so much for, joining today and sharing these things, because I think it's so important that leaders really start to think about, how do I show up in this way? Because this is the new normal, right? We were talking about COVID being the new normal. This is now part of the new normal in the workplace. And so
Yeah.
wanting to make sure they have at least one or two tools in their tool belt that they can tap into as they're building this empathy muscle. So thank you so much for joining. And everyone, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. I hope you were able to walk away with a nugget or two that you can start to deal with or work with in your day-to-day practice. You can find that empathy wheel online. And so start there, use the shower, whatever works for you. But do something that helps you really tap into the humanness. So again, you can tune in every Tuesday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. Be sure to like, share, subscribe. And until next time, have a good one.